Thank you all for joining. Please enter all of your questions into the Q&A box today instead of the chat button. We will be answering them at the end of the call. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Turf. I'm a Senior Director of Product Marketing at EDB, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. Before we get started, I'd like to review a couple of housekeeping items. First, the presentation is being recorded along with the slides. So after the broadcast, we will be sending them out to everyone who's registered for the event. Secondly, please note that all lines are currently muted other than the speakers. We expect the presentation to last about 30 minutes, and we'll have time at the end of that to answer all of your questions. So please be sure to enter those questions in the Q&A panel instead of the chat box. And with that, I'll hand it off to Lætitia to kick us off. Thanks.
Hello. We will be talking today about Postgres 15. Sorry, that's not the right one. Here it is. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Lætitia Avrot. I'm field CTO in the CTO team of EDB. Bruce, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Bruce Momjian, one of the Postgres core team members and 16-year employee at EDB. It's kind of nice to be back on a webinar, Lætitia, I have to say. I've been traveling so much that I'm like, oh, I don't have to go anywhere this morning. We can talk to everybody virtually.
Yes, and we can have a nice cup of tea while talking.
Exactly.
How good is that? So today we have a very full agenda because we will be talking about Postgres 15. So first thing, we will describe the Postgres process of making a new major version or making a new version. Then we will explain several features included in Postgres 15, like what changes for Postgres logs, what changes for logical replication, what is merge, what is copy header changes, what are non-exclusive backups, what about JSON tables, and more. So let's jump into the subject and see the contribution, the code contribution to Postgres. Bruce, would you like to comment this chart?
Of course. Yeah, we have Sarah Conway of EDB to thank for this. She did all this research, and I look at these little slices here, particularly the ones on the top left, and I think, ooh, that's a lot of work. She went through the release notes and I believe the commit logs, and then sliced it up and got the basically organizations or companies that were at least employing that person, whether the person was directly funding to do Postgres work or not. It's not always true. But I love this slide, and everyone loves this slide, because what it really illustrates to me is the huge support Postgres has and diversity that Postgres has across so many different versions. You can see, of course, EDB up here in the top right in blue, and that's a nice size chunk. But what I love also is the number of other colors that I have sort of all throughout, and the names there at the bottom. I love this slide, and I think it speaks to the dynamism of the community and the health of the community that we've grown over so many decades now. And I think we have certainly these companies and the people behind the work to thank for this release.
And I'd just like to add that this is only code contributors, because there are so many also other contributions that can be made to Postgres, like being a member of the CFP committee, being an organizer in a community recognized event, and so on. There are several things that can be done without including code, but that are essential to make Postgres live. So maybe I will see with Sarah if we can try to have at least not all other contributions, but some of them, so that we can have another chart about how Postgres is made. So this is a roadmap, the general roadmap we have each year for Postgres. In April each year, we begin the development of the next version of Postgres. So if you're looking for Postgres 15, it began in April 2021. Then we had developed the new version until April of the next year. So for Postgres 15, it was April 2022. Then we have what we call a feature phrase. No feature will be allowed inside the new version after the feature phrase. Whatever you say, even if your feature is revolutionary and will change everything, it won't be added into Postgres because it's too late. It will be added the next year. From May to September, we have several beta versions. And then we have the release candidate version, 1 or 2, depending on the needs. And then between October and November, we have a new version. It's released normally during the PGConf EU event or a little before. So this is how Postgres is made. Did I miss something, Bruce?
Well, it's funny. There's two things that struck me. One, you and I lived through this, right? And it's kind of funny to see it in a slide, like as a visual, because you think, oh, that's when this happened. Oh, that's when we have these problems. The other funny thing is the dates, the October, November, and sometimes the September sort of targets that we have for these releases. It's not set in stone. I mean, you were talking about earlier that even if a revolutionary feature comes in, April 5th, we don't have a place for it until the next major release for the next year. At the same time, we don't guarantee a release being in that September to October frame. So we had the JSON B case a couple of years ago where we found a suboptimal compression algorithm for JSON B reported in August, and the actual release was in January because we had to recode, improve the compression. And there was actually a lot of angst on that one because we had been pretty regular, but we felt it was the right decision because JSON-B was such an important feature. And we knew once we shipped a binary standard for JSON-B storage, we weren't going to be able to improve it very easily. So that was a tough decision. But there's a lot of fluidity in here. I think that
Yes.
is also a strength. We aren't wedded exactly to these dates.
It will be released when it will be ready. And I love that because that's how you make quality code.
Yeah, it's really hard when you're going through it. And we're going to talk actually about a feature that we had to remove in August, right? As part of this release. Also very hard to see. But the hard decisions have to be made because if you don't, you start accumulating technical debt. And we've been really good, having been doing this for so long, in doing that. But it's hard to push something for next year when you really want it.
Yes, it is. It's like abandoning a children.
Yeah.
That's a child, but you will, it will be there next year. Don't worry about that.
Exactly.
We will still work on it. So let's go into features. So first, Postgres logs. So what's new with Postgres log? First, we have JSON format. So before, Postgres had several outputs for logs, even an event, a Windows event output for Windows. But we have also stderr, and we have syslogs and CSV log. Now we have JSON. Yeah, we have JSON now. And there are also two improvements. The first one is the default changes for log checkpoints, so that by default, all checkpoints will be logged, which is a good thing because you want to know what's happening and when checkpoints are issued. And same thing, the default change for log auto vacuum mean duration by default, before it was deactivated, now it will be 10 minutes so that you will see any auto vacuum that will last more than 10 minutes. And the last one is when you start and it's slow, now you will have logs about what Postgres is doing so that you can understand what it's doing and that it's not frozen. It's doing things. Just make it take some time, make it start properly, and you will be able to stop it properly right after. And I'm very excited about the JSON format because it means that it will be easier when you have Postgres running under Kubernetes. It will be easier to have the logs for Postgres using a simple command like kubectl logs. Do you have something to add about logs, Bruce?
Yeah, I didn't really understand the Kubernetes importance to the JSON format. I mean, yeah, it's a new format, but I didn't realize how important that'd be. The other interesting background here is log checkpoints have kind of a lot of discussion for us. And particularly we were worried that servers, typically the Postgres server doesn't really emit any important information except shut down and start up. And we had a little concern. We have a little concern that very resource limited servers are going to start accumulating logs, and these checkpoints are going to be happening every 5 or 10 minutes. And so just if anyone has that type of situation, just be aware that the logs are going to be a little more chatty. In a normal environment, you're going to have so many stuff in there that the log checkpoint is a non-issue, but just something to keep aware of.
Yes, and of course, you can still decide to deactivate it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, always. It's just the default value that changes.
Yeah.
Then we have some changes for logical replication. So the first one is now you can add whole schemas using create publication or alter publication for tables in schemas with your schema names separated by commas. That's easier when you have a new schema, you want to add it, but that also, it means that when you will create a table inside the schema, by default, it will be added to the publication. So that's very important. You have also now filtering on publication on rows and on columns, which will means that you will send less things to the subscriber. You have also more monitoring functions. And we added also the ability to skip a transaction, because if you have a transaction that's problematic, the logical replication will stop. Now you can instruct your logical replication to skip that transaction and keep going. Which one do you love the most, Bruce?
I'm big on the first one because we have logical replications. It's incredibly flexible. It gives you the ability to sort of obviously selectively decide what you're going to replicate instead of binary replication where everything's replicated. But the big overhead has always been every time you got to create a table, every time you have to also create a publication, and then you have to create subscribers. There's all this sort of hoo-ha that you had to do every time you did a new table. And this is super exciting because it effectively means as soon as you put it in the schema, it gets replicated automatically, which just is a huge overhead, that administrative overhead that goes away. And the second thing, and Lætitia, you know a little more about this than I do, is we have had a request for years to have logical replication slots fail over. And you said that the monitoring here is part of that work that's ongoing.
Well, in my opinion, and that's only a personal opinion, having the ability to list what's in the replication slot directory is a baby step into the direction to be able to fail over using a logical replication. And that's very important for near zero downtime migration to a major version. And also when you have several replications, so let's say you have a transactional database with high availability using a streaming replication, and on top of that, you have logical replication because you have some business analysis you want to do. So you need another schema. In that case, when we fail over on the other standby of the former standby, then your logical replication will break and you will need to recreate it from scratch, which is a pity. So with the ability to fail over on logical replication slots, then it won't be necessary. So that's, in my opinion, a baby step in that direction.
Yeah, that's great. We have had some patches toward that direction, but as I remember, I think it came in the spring and it had some failure cases it wouldn't cover, and then we had to go back. So we continue to work on it. I do get beaten up at conferences about this, and at least I think we're getting closer to that. So thank you.
Yes. Oh, the big feature everyone was looking for is merge. So merge is a simple SQL command that will allow you to merge the differences from one target table into a source table. No, the opposite, to merge changes from one source table to a target table. And you will have several situations. You can say what to do if it match, what you do if it does not match, and so on. There is one limitation, and it's not a Postgres limitation, it's a SQL standard limitation. You can't change the source table while using merge. You will need another statement to change the source table at the same time. I was not that excited about this change because, in my opinion, everything could be done using comment table expressions with inserts and updates, but I think you have a different opinion, Bruce.
I do. Just to add one other downside of this, and again, comes from the SQL standard, is the concurrent access can actually generate errors from merge. So you can, if you're doing concurrent activity, the SQL standard says, oh, if this happens, just throw an error. And I'm like, we don't like to do that, but to follow the SQL standard, we actually had to do it. But you're absolutely right. I have a little more excitement about this. Obviously, first, it's an SQL standard feature, which is great. Second, as you can see from the clauses, and we don't have a great example here, but the docs do, there's a whole bunch of syntax that you can do in terms of crafting a merge that says, okay, if this is a new one and this condition's true, do this thing and that thing. And it's really powerful in terms of packing a lot into one statement. But the big improvement, or the big enhancement I see here, is the part you have here in red, Lætitia, called join condition. Because the traditional way we've told people to do this type of operation was insert on conflict. But as you know, insert on conflict is really row-based. It requires a unique index so that you can figure out what the conflict is. And then you have, okay, if it already exists, do one thing or another. But again, performance-wise, of course, it's doing it row by row. It's not really set-oriented. So that's going to be slower for certain workloads. The second thing is you're requiring a unique index, right? So it has to already exist. And you have to assume that that's how you want to join the data, right? What's interesting about the join condition here in red is that effectively you're creating a join query. The unique index doesn't have to exist. You can do it on different columns, different conditions, and so forth. And then you do the merge. So I see it as sort of a superset of what we had, because it doesn't have the requirements for the unique index, but it also has more sophisticated join conditions, more sophisticated operations you can do. Do I think I'm going to be reaching for it in day one? No. But there are a lot of people who don't really want a row-oriented process. And they're really looking for something that's more set-oriented, more holistic in terms of the types of actions you can specify and so forth. It almost starts to look like a stored procedure when you look at a very sophisticated one. And I think we have, I believe EDB was the big author of this one. And we've been waiting for this for, I think it's 10 years or at least 8 years that this originally started. So it finally got over the goal line.
Yes. Next one is about copy header. So you might know that you can use the SQL copy command to output some values. So here on the first example, I just will issue the value from my table copy test into the standard output without header. And then on the second code, I do the exact same, but with header. So you see that it will add the column names as a header of the output. So that was something you could already do before Postgres 15. But what happened is now, should you issue your data with header into a file, if you try to copy them without saying that you have a header, so that's also something that was happening before, then you will see that it will refuse to add the value because ID is not an integer, so you can't add it to as a value. So you just have to keep saying that you have a header. So that was what we had before. You could output your value with the column names as a header, and you could integrate data.
Actually, Lætitia, we had the header output, but only for CSV format.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that.
The one, yeah. So we had, because CSV format has always had the concept of a header,
Yeah.
right? Because you see when the interchange, you see that header top, and you're supposed to either skip it or you don't skip it, right? So we had it for CSV, but we never had it for text output. So the
Okay.
change is that, yeah, we had the header word, right?
Yes.
But if you tried to do it on a non-CSV output, like the text output here,
Yes.
you get an error because we didn't know how to do anything with it. We just
Okay.
didn't support the
So
header at all, because
we
once you support the
extended.
header, then you got to skip it and the whole thing. Yeah.
So we extended the notion of header to
To be text
non-CSV
format.
files.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we did more than that. If you look here, well, no, here.
Hey, here we go.
Yes, let's say I rename my column from value to text value. If I try to copy using simply the header word, then it will be okay because the data types of my columns are okay. But if I try using header match, then it will say that my header column name does not match the table column names, so that it will refuse, saying that you don't have a match between the header column names in your file and the column names in your table, which will prevent some production disaster, I hope.
Yeah, as you're moving CSV files around, this is an extra check. And
Yes.
that match keyword is new. I believe it also applies to CSV. So I think I'm assuming we did both of them. And again, it's like a double check in case I'm loading the wrong file or something changed in the schema, I'm going to get an error right away. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, the public schema. So you might know that every database created has by default a schema called public. And before Postgres 15, everyone had creation permission on that schema, which was not the best thing. And so we changed that. And now only the owner of the schema or the people you gave explicitly creation permission on the public schema will be able to write in your schema. And the ownership of the public schema will be given to the database owner. And we had to change pgdump to comply to that changes. So it's not a very important change, but it can break things. If you're using pgdump, pgrestore with different versions of Postgres, with different versions of pgrestore, pgdump, then it might fail. So just be aware of that change. And normally you should be fine, but just if you encounter an error, this might be the reason.
But also if you preferred the old behavior, you can
Of course.
explicitly what was happening before, we would implicitly grant access to the
Yeah.
public user to the public schema. And that is the big change. If you preferred that old behavior, you're just going to need to issue a grant command to put it back.
Explicitly.
Yeah, explicitly. Probably
Yeah.
the way we should have done it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that we're sure that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that one because we were fighting for so long to get it. So exclusive backups were a way to do backups that is deprecated since Postgres 9.6. So it means 2016. But and the problem with explicit backups was that should the server crash during an exclusive backup, then you have a risk of data corruption in the cluster, meaning data loss, and you don't want that. So the first thing we did is deprecated this exclusive backup mode, adding an inclusive backup mode. And now we're finally getting rid of it. And it means that to make sure everyone doing backups using Postgres API, we changed the name of the backup functions. So PG start backup becomes PG backup start, and PG stop backup becomes PG backup stop. We also removed two functions that were linked to only to exclusive backups, PG backup start time and PG is in backup. And now the next step for you is to check if your backup tool is ready for Postgres 15 and exclusive backups and inclusive backups. Normally, if you're using a recent enough version of Barman and PG-based backups, they should be ready. And as I said, after Postgres 9.6, so normally they are ready, and PG backrest is ready for inclusive backups. So all these three tools are checked and ready for Postgres 15. Just make sure that your tool is ready for Postgres 15. If you're using a third-party tool, ask them, because they need to know. And I'm not sure they are aware of this change. You have anything to add, Bruce?
No, as I remember, the big deal here is that you have to maintain an open connection to the database. Yes. Because then multiple people can have the connection. If the connection disappears, the backup goes away, it cleans itself up, and you don't have the corruption problem that is reported here.
And this was heartbreaking, but we had to say goodbye to JSON table, which was a feature we were waiting for, but it was not ready for Postgres 15. So we decided to take it to Postgres 16. And people are actively working on them to make sure that this feature gets ready for Postgres 16. Do you have anything to
Yeah, this is the
add,
one.
Bruce?
This is the one we tried to resurrect as best we could. There was some overhead in the way we were doing JSON tables that was basically using save points for every data conversion. And we felt if we released it that way, the performance was going to be terrible. People were going to hate the feature, and reputation wise and stability wise, we were worried that JSON giving people JSON tables would in that implementation that was creating a huge number of save points that was just not going to be acceptable. So that was removed in August. That's what we alluded to earlier in the talk. We looked to see if we could find a way of could we get any of the feature, because there's a whole bunch of things in this package here, but they all relied on this data conversion. I remember talking to the release committee, trying to say, is there anything we can get out of here that we could, and just no, because everything relied on that one data conversion requirement. So we've been even working this week on a new API for data conversion. that allows to detect errors without requiring save points. So that's moving forward. And then forward to that, once that's in, then JSON tables will come back, and hopefully in the next couple months we can get that in, because I know a lot of people are waiting for it.
Yes. And it's another SQL compliant feature.
Exactly.
So that's something we need. And of course, Postgres 15 is way more than just a few features we described. So make sure you read the release notes before upgrading. And it comes with also better performance. For example, sort performance has been improved in some conditions. You have also better partitioning, better performance for partitioning, and so on. Better security and better monitoring. Just you will find everything in the release note. So make sure you read it, and you will find everything is easy to read and to understand there. And also, we are talking about Postgres 15, which means, in my opinion, when we talk Postgres 15, we mean the latest minor release of Postgres 15. So just make sure that you're at least in Postgres 15.1, because it's out since the 10th of November, because the Postgres project releases at least a minor version every quarter. So if you're running Postgres 15.0, please upgrade to Postgres 15.1 and you'll be safe. Okay, I think we can go to questions now.
Thanks, Lætitia and Bruce. As a reminder, if you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. I won't be covering the chat box questions there. So if you've already put something in chat that you'd like answered, please put it in the Q&A and we'll get that answered for you. We have several already in, so please enter it in there and we'll try to answer as many as we can. So the first question that we have, and these are somewhat in order of the way the webinar rolled out, but is EDB working on a solution to fix the XTID 32-bit issue so vacuum will not be needed as much?
So yes, we do have a patch that we're looking at for Postgres 16 that's going to extend the XID to 64-bit. We believe vacuum will probably still be needed because we still have to clean up the old versions. I think it's the freezing that will be the big beneficiary there, because of course the XID horizon will be much, much larger. In fact, we're having a discussion now over how big that horizon should be. Like, you know, previously we sort of forced people to have a vacuum freeze every, I guess, billion or 2 billion transactions. That could become much larger, and what performance impact are we going to see if the exact directory or the multi-exact directory get big? So we're actually debating what monitoring we need for those type of situations. Yes, we are working on that. I am very excited about that patch.
Great. Next question. Does EDB follow the same structure to enable the capabilities? And I think this might be asking about EDB products and along the same schedule as the Postgres releases. I will just add something, and then Bruce and Lætitia, you can jump in. But typically we do launch EPAS, which is our enterprise extended version of Postgres. Usually with around the same time as the .1 release of the Postgres. This year, because we're adding transparent data encryption, we wanted to have a little bit more time to complete that, and so we're expecting to release EPAS in Q1 of next year. So getting very close, so just a few months away. But I don't know if either you want to add anything to that as well.
No, that's fine.
All right, next question is, I need to understand what all the overhead using logical bidirection replication will be.
I will pick that one.
Please.
If you're tempted to use logical bidirectional replication without a specific product like PGD, don't. Sean wrote a very good blog you will find on EDB blog explaining why in details. You will have more troubles than anything using that. It's not a feature. It's not meant to be used that way. Please don't.
Great, thank you. Next question, will logical replication support logical restore command to decode from archived WALs in the future? This may be helpful for delayed replication scenarios.
I thought we did that already.
That was my thing.
Same thing, yeah. There's no difference between replicating. Okay, so the wall that gets sent streaming and the wall that gets stored in the archive directory are the same wall. We can do the same things with it. We're not aware, I don't think Lætitia is either, of any limitations of doing logic replication, even if it's days old from the archive directory.
Great, thanks. Here's one we touched on a little bit, but will you be covering version 15 and TDE? So again, I think that's regarding EPAS. So that is expected, as I said, in Q1, and we'll have several marketing events. We'll have a webinar and a series of blog articles around the various security enhancements in EPAS and leading up to TDE right before the release. So we'll cover that in the next couple of months. Next question is, does copy header work with \copy also?
From the PSQL documentation, \copy behaves the exact, the \copy options between the parentheses behaves the same way that the copy header, the copy options in the parentheses. So it should work the exact same.
Very good. Is there a new function for PG as in backup?
No.
Same as always. All right. If someone is already using JSON table in a previous version, what action is required for those to use Postgres 15?
Yeah, I can take that. I think, Lætitia, when you expressed it, it sounded like we were removing JSON tables. And I think somebody might have gotten that. We're not removing it. It was when we said we didn't get it, it mean we had to, we added it to the code before April, before the feature freeze. And then in August, we had to remove it again. So nobody would have been using that in production. It was really, and again, I guess it's a good sign. We didn't give it to people and then realize there's a problem and take it away. We realized there's a problem before we really gave it to people for production and removed it during beta.
And you can keep using your JSON columns the way you were using them before.
We didn't remove any JSON in this release.
No.
We just didn't get what we hoped to get, and we're hoped for 16.
Yeah.
Right. All right. If one replica has an issue, can we recover the replica from another replica instead of rebuilding everything from the master? The other replicas are all in one region while master is in a different region. So recovering from the same region will save time. Hope that made sense.
Are we talking about logical replica or physical replica?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Like for binary replication, you pick the replica that's most advanced in terms of its logical sequence number, and then you can have all the other replicas catch up from that new replica. But that's only for binary replication. For logical replication, as we talked about earlier, you have to recreate the logical replica, and that's why we're hoping to get a logical replication failover slots working as soon as possible in a major release. Good question.
Can JSON tables be imitated read-only by creating a view consisting of columns that extract the JSON data from a JSON column within a table?
Well, the JSON tables was an SQL feature, a standard SQL feature. So you can do the same things, but you won't use the same SQL syntax.
Yeah, it's also my understanding, Lætitia, that the person is, I'm afraid, mixing some things. So if you're storing JSON in a column, yeah, you just pull it out, you use it fine. What I understood JSON tables to do was effectively take the query output that is relational and make it appear as a JSON document. That's the thing that we weren't able to do. And as you can imagine, it was the data conversions going from the SQL data types to the JSON types that was causing the performance problem, that caused us to have to use save points, that caused us to have to remove the feature. So I don't know how you would do, again, if you're pulling stuff from JSON in and out, that's fine. If you are wanting to convert SQL relational output to JSON, I don't know exactly. I'm not sure how I would do that. So it's a mixed thing. One is a JSON column. The other one is taking relational output and converting that to a JSON structure. That's what I believe JSON tables did.
Great. Next question is, does BDR support Postgres SQL 15? And BDR has been renamed by EDB as Postgres Distributed, but I'll let you guys answer that if you want. So I think Postgres Distributed does cover, is part of, does now support Postgres 15, is part of our Postgres 15 platform launch that we did a couple weeks ago. So, or maybe just even last week, but so there's a blog that will be coming out on that, but I think we also sent out emails to current customers about that as well.
Sounds good.
What does the UDP status port do? Is there a risk it could be an opening for hackers?
So I think I can answer this. The UDP status port is removed in Postgres 15 because up until Postgres 15, and that was one of the features we didn't mention. We talked about some memory improvements, Lætitia. One of the things that we did for Postgres 15 was to remove the UDP communication that we've used for server statistics, where we used to send all of the activity to the statistics collector by UDP. That entire statistics collector has now been moved into the server and now stores everything in shared memory. Andreas Freud did a Herculean job of getting that done, and I was so happy to see it leave because I just found the architecture to be kind of clunky. Yes, the UDP port really was never a security issue, but because UDP is by definition, inner process and so forth. But in terms of how we did things and the potential for losing messages during heavy activity and the requirement to write the status file into the file system so other servers could read the status was really hokey. And I'm very glad that Andreas Freud has made that change in Postgres 15. The UDP port is no more.
Can you reiterate how or why version 15 is better for monitoring?
It's better for monitoring because first the defaults for logging are better, and I feel that most monitoring tools are failing when they don't look at the Postgres log, because that's where you can find out what's happening. So knowing when you have checkpoints, that's something you should monitor actually, and the checkpoints duration and how frequently they happen, and knowing if you have a vacuum, an auto vacuum running for 1 hour, 2 hours, that's something you want to monitor. So I'm very happy that the default for some logs has been changed. Also, a lot of monitoring tools are working better with JSON. So having the logs output in JSON is also better. Then you have some new functions to monitor what's going on with logical replication. So that's also something that you will get from monitoring. And I think we also added something to PG statement. Am I right, Bruce?
Well, we added the query ID in Postgres 14.
Yes, that was Postgres 14.
We did add, obviously, as I said before, the server runtime statistics is a much more robust system, less overhead. We also added some monitoring of memory usage that we didn't have
Yeah.
before. For example, how shared memory is used, number of huge pages was hard to figure out before. That's much easier.
Great, thank you. All right, this question, I think we covered, but I'll just reiterate it again. Is EDB 15 also released? So again, EPAS 15 will be released in Q1. We did release last week EDB Postgres 15, which is kind of the platform release, which is, all of our tools support Postgres 15. We also, with that release, several extensions, one for an auto tuner, a couple on some storage optimizations, LDAP sync, and some improvements for Kubernetes. And then also PG15 can run in Big Animal now. So this isn't a product webinar, but I just wanted to make sure that that was clear between those, that distinction is clear. EPAS 15 will come out again next year. Next question is there any impact on Barman, PEM, and REP manager? And I think, again, that's part of what I just described, which is that all of our tools are supporting PG15 as of last week.
And make sure to upgrade Barman, because due to the change of exclusive backups not being supported anymore, Barman will stop working if you're in a previous version of Barman. With it won't work with Postgres 15. But of course, you know that you should use the latest version of the tools to prevent any known security failure to happen and so on. But still, for Barman to work with Postgres 15, you need to be using the latest version of Barman.
Thank you. Is there automatically table partitioning option?
I guess it means that features that would create partition on the fly when it's needed, something like that. What do you think, Bruce?
I'm guessing it means create partitions for values that fall outside the predefined ranges. I believe EPAS does that and community does not.
Yeah.
I think that's right. All right. When is it going to be possible to do a vacuum full without blocking tables?
Not now. And if you need to do a vacuum full, it means something failed at some point, because normally you're supposed to monitor carefully and to tune auto vacuum so that you don't need a vacuum full unless you are using big chunks, updating or inserting big chunks of data at a time. If you're having a transactional workload, which I assume here because you'd like not to block your tables, then monitoring carefully your bloats should prevent the need to having a vacuum full. But that's out of the question. Your question was, when will it be possible to do a vacuum full without blocking table? And that's not coming right now because that's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, we do have external projects that try to do that. PG Reorg, PG Repack.
PG
They
Squeeze
have.
too.
I'm sorry.
PG Squeeze.
PG Squeeze. I haven't heard that one. It's a new one on me. Okay, so we do have people who are working on that. I'd love to have it, and maybe we need to put more engineering work in those because they're a little on the riskier side because they're doing some very complicated things. But that would be probably the first place I would check for that type of capability. But I'd also be cautious about that as well.
Yes, we've seen some data loss due to corruption, due to PG Repack or another third-party tool. So as I said, it's not something easy to do, and easy, and you don't want to lose your data, obviously. So it will take some time.
Are there any improvements in transaction number wraparound that consume a lot of transaction log space?
I think it's the same as changing the number from int32 to int64.
I guess they're looking for something that's reducing consumption of XIDs. That's what I heard they were asking. Yes, you're right. If we go to a larger XID space, the consumption is not an issue. Whether they were asking about that or the other, but I don't see anything in this release that would reduce XID consumption that I can think of.
Okay. Does logical replication mean that we can replicate selected schema?
Yes.
That was that first thing we talked about.
Yep. Okay. Okay, this one is a little confusing, but I'll try to convert it to a question. UDP 54565 postgres.exe database sends stats to stats collector on a randomly assigned UDP port, which can vary. This should be posted on a logical loop. I'm not sure if this is just information for people, but I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Well,
We
it's gone,
already
so.
spoke.
Yeah,
we
we're
already
good.
spoke about it.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
I know some of these questions are coming in.
That's
but
great. But we love the questions.
yeah, lots of questions. Just so people know, we might not get to all of your questions, but we do get a list of them, and we'll try to respond to your email for any questions we're not able to answer here. But we'll keep charging forward and try to get a few more of these in before our time is up. Has there been further work on Z-heap storage engine for Postgres, or any release dates expected?
You want to talk about that, Bruce?
Okay. Yeah, Z-heap was a very ambitious approach to replace the storage engine used by the multi-version concurrency control system. Particularly, it was going to implement undo in a way that Postgres does not currently do. We have redo, but not undo, when we effectively use vacuum to do the cleanup. Unfortunately, that proved to be too large of a project, and it became stalled. I know that Cybertech has started working on it again out of Austria, but I have not heard any status on that. So that's all that I know about. I maybe ask Cybertech how it's going, but I have not heard anything in the past 18 months about status of that, except for the hope that Cybertech would pick it up.
All right. What is the upgrade order for primary and standby? Do we need to have downtime for both standby and primary?
It depends. It depends how you plan to upgrade. Do you want to use a near zero downtime upgrade using a logical replication, or do you plan to upgrade using a PG upgrade? In that case, if you want to simply use PG upgrade, my advice would be to stop both standby and primary. First primary, then standby, and then upgrade both. And then just read carefully the documentation in PG upgrade, because everything is described there.
Perfect, thank you. Are there plans for merge to support delete as well? I believe it already does, but I'll let you guys confirm that. Does merge support delete, the merge command? I thought it did, but I'll leave it to the experts.
I'm not sure.
Right, well,
I know it. We can insert, we can update. Let me check. It will be easy, because that's a very simple thing.
all right, I'm going to go on to the next question while you're looking for that. But is it possible to create physical backups from only a binary replica using version 15 start and stop backup functions?
Yeah, you can basically, yeah, the manual does cover this. You would do PG backup, you would do PG backup start. You would obviously take a copy of the data directory, but you would also need a copy of all of the write-ahead logs that were generated during the backup. And then PG backup stop would then terminate it. So yes, that is a very standard way of doing a backup, and it is documented. You can use the backup method to do that.
I have the answer for merge. Yes, you can delete with merge.
Delete
Thanks,
with merge,
Lætitia.
good. And PG base backup obviously is the best way to do it. So I'm giving you the hard way, but the easy way to do backup using replication is just do PG base backup, and it'll handle the write-ahead log. Make sure you have all the write-ahead logs you need and issue all the commands perfectly. So PG base backup is probably where you should be looking if you're looking to do backup by replication.
Yes.
Physical
And
backup, I'm sorry.
yeah, I'd like PG base backup to be renamed PG close my Postgres cluster.
All right, are statistics updated during commit and chain, or do we still have to commit separately to get them updated as in the past?
I can answer that one. There are not yet. We're working on it. It's not that easy, but at the moment when using a commit and chain, the statistics are not updated.
Great. All right. Is there any movement towards storing a timestamp when objects are created?
I have a blog about that. We basically aren't sure exactly what to store when. For example, if you do a PG restore, do we restore the date that it was created originally or the new one? So there's a bunch of different creation dates. Like if you do vacuum full, are we recording that date? So the problem is we've never really been able to agree on when to store the date. And because of that, we've kind of not done it. I've not heard any movement in that direction.
I'm going to do one more question, and I apologize. I know we have several more questions that we don't have time to get to, but we are nearly out of time, and the system will end the call for us if we don't. So like I said, we will get a report of all the questions that you've answered or asked, and we'll try to answer them to those individuals who are asking them. But one last question, hopefully a fairly straightforward one. Is there a built-in function that can clear orphan transactions? I'm saying no's.
No.
No, you need to scan PG stat activity and then issue PG terminate backend for the ones that you want to get rid of.
Great. That's all the time we have today. If as I mentioned, if we didn't have time to answer your question today, we'll try to get back to you. If you have a question that comes up later, you can always go to enterprisedb.com/contact and ask us a question. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. But with that, we thank you again for joining the webinar. We will share the recording and the slides with everybody who registered. So I know that question was asked a couple of times. And we'll get that out to you as soon as possible. And hope everyone has a great rest of the day. And again, thank you for joining. Take care, everyone.